Well, good morning, everybody. Wow, last night was just fantastic. That was a great night, and we're just excited to be here this morning to kick off this new exhibit and help celebrate Dad's Centennial year. And I want to thank Don Holloway and Jim Kravitz and Jamie and Bettina. They all did so much to put this exhibit together, and some of the pictures I've never seen. My favorite thing up there, and I remember, Mike, you're going to remember this, Susan, you're going to remember this, President Lyndon Johnson, when Dad was a young congressman and the Vietnam War was going on, and Dad and President Johnson went toe-to-toe on issues, and I'll never forget President Johnson saying, "That dang Jerry Ford played too much football without a football helmet." And Dad used to say, "No, I wore a helmet," and he had this old leather football helmet at our house that he would bring out and show us kids. And it wasn't much of a football helmet. I mean, it's like you could fold it up and put it in your pocket. It was so soft. But to see that up in the exhibit just brings back great memories for our family and Susan and Mike and I. So it's a neat thing. We're glad to be here, and we're just honored to be supported by this community in Grand Rapids and West Michigan. So let the ceremony start, and if we could have our bagpiper.
Good morning. God has blessed us with a beautiful day this morning to celebrate the opening of the exhibit and celebrate this great facility, our Presidential Museum. So let us return thanks. If you'll pray with me, please. This is the day that you have made, and we rejoice and we are glad in it. Gracious God, we exalt your name on this beautiful morning. We gather to give thanks for the life and legacy of Gerald R. Ford, our 38th president, our native son of Michigan, and this, his home of Grand Rapids. We thank you for the godly values of strength of character, of integrity, of courage and compassion that marked Jerry Ford's life, and which serve as a model for all of us to follow. We thank you, God, for this beautiful Presidential Museum, which honors Jerry Ford and our country. And we thank you for the skilled and dedicated staff who care for this museum and who serve so graciously those who come through the doors. And on this day, we pray that these new exhibits will indeed tell the story of President Ford, of Jerry Ford, of his life and his leadership and his ways in which he loved his family, his country, his community. And may they inspire us to live lives of citizen leadership and service. And we pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ford Presidential Museum. My name is Elaine Didier, and it's my privilege to serve as the director of the library in Ann Arbor and the museum here in Grand Rapids. The exhibit we are opening today has been 1.5 years in the making, a longer and more intensive project than we usually undertake for a feature exhibit. But obviously, this exhibit is very special to us. Our curator, Don Holloway, made 5 week-long trips to Ann Arbor and to use materials at the Ford Presidential Library and also at our sister institution, the Bentley Historical Library, which is the archives of the University of Michigan. While in Ann Arbor, Don spent time on the University of Michigan campus walking the streets and buildings and photographing the places where President Ford would have spent time as a student there. This exhibit is special in a number of ways. First, it includes a number of artifacts and documents that have not been on exhibit before. These include personal items from the scrapbook kept by Dorothy Ford, her baby book in which she kept careful records about her first child. Thanks are due to the Ford family for donating this to the museum within the last year. We also include a travel trunk, which was owned by Gerald Ford Sr. and which President Ford inherited when he passed in 1962, and which was donated to us by Ron and Eileen Weiser, one of our trustees, who purchased it at auction earlier this year and then shipped it to the museum. We're very grateful for that gift. We also include film footage of Junior Ford, as he was known then, playing high school and college football, and the very famous game ball from the 1934 Michigan-Georgia Tech football game. This game was controversial because of the Willis Ward incident, but it was also the only game won by Michigan during Ford's senior season, and interestingly, it was the last football game that he would ever play and win. The exhibit is also special because it includes sets, which are not customary elements of our exhibits. We're very grateful that Chairman Steve Ford, Joe Calvaruso, and the Ford Foundation were supportive of our proposal to create them for this exhibit. In the sets upstairs, you will see recreations of the home of his youth at 649 Union, a Boy Scout camp, Shawandasi, located north of Muskegon in West Michigan, One of my favorites is Bill's Place, the hamburger joint across from South High, where he worked and where he unexpectedly met his birth father, Leslie King. There's a locker room and the very famous Delta Kappa Epsilon Shant, a freestanding building on campus where the Deeks met every Saturday night. I do not know whether they were not allowed to date on Saturday or whether they had a meeting first and then went out for the evenings. But Gerald Ford became a Deek at the end of his freshman year. The majority of the materials on display in the exhibit are from our collections, but we also borrowed artifacts from the Grand Rapids Public Museum, obtained football footage from the Grand Rapids Public Library's special collections, and of course documents and football film from the Bentley Library at the University of Michigan. I'd like to recognize and thank our wonderful museum team for their work as a team bringing this to fruition. First and foremost, Don Holloway, the curator, was the lead on this exhibit. Jamie Draper, the registrar who handled all of the artifact and document loans. Bettina Kuzno is our exhibit specialist who designed the exhibit. And Jim Kratzis, deputy director, who edited all of the labels and is a master at that. Team, take a bow. We've got Jamie over there, Bettina. They are the best, and I'm so privileged to work with them. We want to thank the Ford family for their wonderful commitment and continuing donations of materials from President and Mrs. Ford to our collections, and of course to thank the Ford Foundation for funding this exhibit and supporting so much of what we do with public programs, education, and all of our exhibits. We truly could not do what we do without the Foundation's support, in addition to that of our parent organization, the National Archives. Steve and Joe and all of the trustees, thank you so much. Now it's my pleasure to invite Paul O'Neill, Secretary Paul O'Neill, and then Ambassador Peter Secchia to the podium to share some remarks.
Thank you, Elaine. I first knew President Ford when he was House Minority Leader, and then, of course, as Vice President, and then as President, and in all of his post-presidential years. I think not enough American people understand President Ford in the way those of us who had the privilege to serve with him knew him. He was a lifelong student, and he lived by the motto, "Be prepared." And it was fascinating to work with him. I remember him calling me in one time and saying, "Paul, I'd like to understand the economics of the off-ramps of interstate highways." Honest to God, he said, "I want to know what happens to property values, what kind of businesses are attracted, how many people will be employed, and particularly, Paul, I'd like to know on the clover leaves that are coming off the interstates in Michigan." So fascinating to work with someone who understood that there were economic consequences of federal decisions of all kinds. On the macro level, because he did serve in the House for 25 years, 23 on the Appropriations Committee, he was a great student of questions of how we allocated resources in the country, how we made choices and decided what to fund and what not to fund. So he knew in his time how many people we needed in uniform, how many ships we needed, how many aircraft we needed, what their capabilities should be, where they should be based in the world, because he thought about things in a systems way that I think not many people appreciate. There are not a lot of people like that in life. He was one of those people who had an intuitive, instinctive, analytic systems mind and saw the relationships between and among things. So I have to tell you, he would be appalled today to hear the too frequent conversations where people think they're having an intelligent conversation when they talk about what fraction of GDP defense spending should be. He knew what it should be as a consequence of deliberate decisions about what we needed to secure our place in the world. He was not someone who lived in the ether of political speak. And so during the time he was president, I had the privilege to sit at the right corner of his desk while he went through with us 3-inch binders for every single activity, department, function of everything in the government, and saw it in the context of what the society needed. And he would sit there and puff on his pipe when it was still okay to puff on a pipe, and quieting liberty with his right hand while he was talking with us. I was not alone. I was always there because I was kind of the glue deputy person, but frequently Jim Lynn and Jim Cannon and Vice President Rockefeller and Brent Scowcroft, Carla Hills. Carla Hills was one of the great successful person in getting her appeals approved because after we'd made decisions, then cabinet secretaries could come in and appeal to the president. I want to have another hearing about this. And Jim Lynn always said he never was able to sustain an argument against Carla Hills because her legs were better than his. Anyway, it was hundreds of hours. He was not a casual president. He was a serious president that we should pray we could have again. Someone who thought about and made deliberate decisions about how we should present ourselves to the world and what we should aspire to as a people. Last night, Brent talked about some events. I remember some events that are mostly below the threshold of what people talk about, Helsinki and the rest of that. But 10 days after the president became president, he issued a proclamation that was unbelievably unpopular at the time, providing for a conditional pardon of the draft debaters. It was an act of great courage, and I think he said at the time, it would be terrible to have moral shame along with humiliation. He got it right. The tone was right. The concept was right. It was unpopular. But he knew, better than all of his political advisors, what the right thing was. And in 1975, I think actually, Brendan, April of 1975, he announced that we, the American people, were going to accept 130,000 refugees from Vietnam. It was also an unbelievably unpopular decision. And at the time he called me in and he said, Paul, this must be executed flawlessly because there's so much sentiment against doing it. We cannot let the critics have ammunition that not only did we do it, but we did it in a way that caused great furor in the communities in the United States. So he knew. And he trusted those of us around him to understand it was our obligation to make sure that things worked properly when he made a decision. So he was also a great person to work with and for in personal ways. So whenever my wife would be invited to the White House, which is the only place she ever saw me in those days, the president would always seek her out and he would hold her hand and he would thank her for my work for him. It was a touch that really mattered a lot. And he knew instinctively, as a leader, that he could only be as good as the people who were there to work for him and be for him and to follow his lead every day. A really special time. At the holidays, he would call our house and to wish us happy holidays. You know, if you think about a busy president, to take that time to call the House and say, really appreciate what you're doing for me. And then the last weekend of his presidency to say to me, you've been really working hard, and I want you to take your family to Camp David. You know, it's a memory my family will never forget. So I was privileged to give the commencement address over at Ann Arbor at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy on Saturday. And my parting words to them I want to share with you. I said to them, if you want to be a proper legatee of Gerald R. Ford as you carry his name forward from this school, you will remember these words. Be prepared, do the right thing, and in everything you do, guide your actions by these words, on my honor. Fabulous, wonderful, great human being. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm local, and I'm to talk to the locals. I'm to remind them that we are all in this together, and this is our country, and he was our leader, and he was our favorite, and he was a special person. And many of you were here the night the casket was positioned for viewing. And I am to tell how we bring this back to Grand Rapids, because this is not just an exhibition on the story of growing up grand, but isn't it grand to have him and his bride, his number one advisor, back with us? And when we came in on Air Force One with the casket, we flew over the big house. And I know the big house very well, and probably half of you in the audience are fans of that school, and probably one or two too many, but, you know, I'm on the other side of the Michigan State side, but I went up and sat by the casket as the plane tipped over the beautiful stadium, and I remember talking to the flag that was draped on his coffin saying, "We're bringing you back home, Bubba." And how emotional that was, because a few minutes later we landed at the Gerald R. Ford International Airport, unquote. His airport, coming home to his neighborhood, coming home to you, the people who stood by him through all those years, from 1948 on, election after election. And we knew the bets. I mean, I'm sure many of you had bets as I did, $5 every game. He wouldn't bet basketball with me, but he bet football. And he won a lot of those bets. And the payments were always late. If you knew Jerry, he was tighter than a second coat of paint. And you could not, you'd have to remind him he owed you $5. So what happens to me? Steve has now taken his position. After 10 years of not too well a record and 4 years of Rich Rod, I now have the man here who I'm paying $10 to. And we're increasing those bets in memory of the man who was here with the flag on his casket, because he'll always be a friend to all of you. Everybody in Grand Rapids thinks they knew him well, but everybody in Grand Rapids knows they loved him. They loved him in spite of the negative letters from the Dilley family that were always in the Grand Rapids press, saying terrible things about our congressman. Those of you in the audience over 70 are chuckling because those letters were abundant. And then you know the letters criticizing him for the pardon, and then the wonderful accolades he got for doing that making that tough decision, ending the war in Vietnam after being criticized for supporting Nixon. We knew him differently. We knew him when he had holes in his pocket from putting his hot pipe in there. We know him when the office ladies, Mildred Leonard, and those who worked for him in the early days would tell us he tapped his pipe in the wastebasket and often started a fire. We knew him when the days when he would come by the house, sit down, take off his shoes, and have a hole in his socks. When he became president, his salary was $36,000 a year as a congressman. It was obvious that it was tough putting kids through school and doing the travel that he had to do as the House Minority Leader. And he loved golf, which was also expensive, and he loved his family, but he was a very busy man. We loved him for that integrity. You know, that serve with honor, the daily lessons he taught us, to disagree without being disagreeable. I remember once when I was staying there, I read in the paper that Tip O'Neill had said terrible things, and the president was my president. He was Grand Rapids. He was one of us. I went downstairs to look for him, and he wasn't there. Where is he? He's playing golf with Tip O'Neill. I didn't quite understand that. And when he came back, I just asked him to explain that. Maybe he understood cloverleafs then, but he really understood how to disagree without being disagreeable. And his friendship with Tip O'Neill. Look, whose statement is on the statue outside? Tip O'Neill, the leader of the Democrat Party. That alone is a symbol of his relationship across the aisle. He taught us to defend the two-party system. I learned how important that was in Italy, where they have 42 political parties. It took a week to have a coalition leadership meeting. He taught us to be kind to others, and he followed that Scout creed. The trip home in Air Force One will always be remembered by all of us, lining the streets 8, 10 deep. Hundreds of thousands of people lined up. The line across that bridge through the convention center, 24 hours overnight, waiting in the cold to come say goodbye to him, and we did it right here. And Steve said, well, tell some funny stories about the local. I can't do it because I only remember that last vision I had right here. And he loved us as we loved him. And I would caution you all that keep looking, because there'll be another person like him to come forward and lead our country. Hopefully, we will find that person soon, but they are going to be rare. And the cascade of integrity will always be on our minds, because most of us who live in this county were fortunate enough to be part of that viewing. So we will continue viewing and always have the memory. We loved him dearly. Thank you.
On behalf of my co-chairs, Doug DeVos, Stephen Andel, and Hank Meyer, we want to say thank you to all of you that made this wonderful occasion possible, particularly Joe and Donna Calvaruso. It's been a pleasure to work with you. This event was a preview of 2 years from now. I'd like to have you all put that time frame on your calendar. We will be dedicating a new addition on the south side of this building, as well as all new exhibits. And part of that requires, of course, raising more money. So I want to close this session with a little poem that we used at the first fundraising event for this building. And that poem is this: among the things that count a lot, money's not. But if anything will help a little, it'll. We are adjourned.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Master Sergeant Bob McDonald. On behalf of Captain Curtis Kinsey and all of the members of the Army Chorus, it is a great honor to be back in Grand Rapids and singing for the Ford family. This morning we'll begin with America the Beautiful, then you'll hear an arrangement of My Country 'Tis of Thee, followed by the Lee Greenwood song God Bless the USA. And we close with a song which I believe was the President's favorite song. Virtually every time we sang for him, we ended with this song, and that song is, of course, the University of Michigan fight song.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the ones who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the leaders and best. Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the leaders of the West. Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the leaders and best. Hail to the victors valiant, hail to the conquering heroes, hail, hail to Michigan, the leaders of the West.
Thank you all very much. Enjoy the exhibit, and thank you to the Army Corps, you guys. We were counting last night, maybe their 28th or 29th time they've come and done something for mom and dad every year. So we're very grateful. Thank you, guys. Yes, ma'am.
Glad to be here.